welcome back to Study Room. This is your English tutor again. So today we are going to do the chapter 6 titled as This is Jody's Fawn. Okay, so this chapter today that we are going to do, it's about Jody. Maybe it's the protagonist's name that we will know. So let's read about who wrote the story first, then the themes of the story, and then how we go about it. We read the story, right? So yes. About the author. So the author is Marjorie Kinnan Rawlings. So Marjorie Kinnan Rawlings is the author of the story. Winner of the Pulitzer Prize in 1939. So this prize is one of the highest accolades that is considered in literature. 1896 to 1953. She's an American author who mostly wrote stories in rural settings. So by rural settings, so she basically wrote stories about villages, about poor people, about the settings that actually happens in villages. She won the prize for a book called The Yearling, an excerpt of which is given in this chapter. So today the story that we are also going to read has an excerpt. Excerpt is again a part of a big story. So The Yearling is the book that she won the prize, and from that only we are going to do the excerpt of today. So the themes in the story. The theme of the story is loneliness and guilt. When Jody's father is bitten by a rattlesnake, he has to kill a doe and use its liver to save himself. Jody cannot help but wonder what will happen to the fawn without its mother. So this theme of the story is very deep. It's about loneliness and guilt. You know, whenever we are in some part or someday, we just feel very lonely. Even if we have hundreds of people around, but we know that there's nobody to understand us, we feel very lonely. And guilt factor, you know, whenever we tell a lie to somebody, we do some wrong deed which we know we are wrong, but we cannot help it. We go into this trap of guilt, right? So that is what happens with Jody in this story. As we unfold the story, you will know the exact part. But yeah, so this Jody's father is bitten by a rattlesnake, and to save his father and use its liver, he basically kills a doe. And then he can't stop. He goes into this guilt factor that what will happen to the fawn without its mother? What will happen to the doe? Because, you know, he's killed and everything. Now, another theme in the story is the kinship between man and animal. So, kinship is basically relation. So, this one theme is very important for all of us to know. You know, a lot of you must have pets at your home and you care for it like a family. And people judge you like, what are you doing? Why are you getting dresses for your dogs? What are you doing this for the cat? But the relationship and the love that we share is more than the bond that we have for our own family members. So, this is also one more theme that bonds in the story. Though Jody raises the fawn out of guilt, he develops a relationship with it. Love and compassion are necessities without which humanity cannot survive. So along with kinship, the one thing that we all need to understand is, guys, that love and compassion are two things without which you cannot live or survive in your life. These two are very important for a happy living. Now let's start reading the story. After we have discussed the author, we have discussed that this is an excerpt from The Yearlings, for which is won a prize. We have discussed the theme, the major three themes: loneliness, guilt and kinship. Along with that, love and compassion. So this is the story that we're going to read. This is Jody's fawn. Jody allowed his thoughts to drift back to the fawn. He could not keep it out of his mind. He had held it in his dreams, in his arms. He slipped from the table and went to his father's bedside. Penny lay at rest. His eyes were open and clear, but the pupils were still dark and dilated. So the story starts with the guilt factor, where it's trying to tell us how Jody is into his thoughts about thinking about the fawn. We still don't know what he's actually done. He's thinking about it in his dreams. He slips from the table. He's like very feared. It's very disturbing. He goes to his father's bedside, where he sees his father's eyes are open, but it's like dark pupils and everything. Jody said, "How are you feeling, Pa?" "Just fine, son. Old Death has gone thieving elsewhere, but wasn't it a close shave?" And then he says, "I agree." So he asks his father, "How are you feeling?" And he says that, "I just crossed the death. It feels like, it was really a very close miss." Penny said, I'm proud of you, boy, the way. So Penny is the father's name. I'm proud of you, boy, the way you kept your head and did what was needed. So he says to his son that I'm proud that you did this for me. I'm proud that whatever you did. He says, Pa, and he stops because he's into his guilt. There's this feeling of not completing. It happens with us also, right? So he says, yes, son. Pa, do you recollect the doe and the fawn? And he says, I can never forget them. The poor doe saved me, that's certain. Pa, the fawn may be out here yet. It might be hungry and very sick, scared. And he says, I suppose so. So here Jody is actually trying to ask his father that, do you remember that doe and fawn, and it must be like really scared for them and everything. But his father is more in the sense ki, yeah, I know, I remember them because they saved my life. So obviously I remember them. But yeah, okay, fine, they must be scared. He's not into that relation of love. Pa, this is what Jody says. I'm a big boy now and don't need to drink milk. Why don't I go and see if I can find the fawn? And then the father says, and bring it here. And the son says, and raise it. Penny lay quiet, staring at the ceiling. So he was confused. The father thinks, what is the child doing? And he's saying that I'm old, I'm grown up now, so I can go and find the fawn, protect it, bring it here, raise it. Boy, you have got me hemmed in. So the father says, you've got me confused. I don't know what to say to you. It won't take much to raise it, Pa. It'll soon start eating leaves and acorns. So then he's trying to convince his father that, it'll not take too much to raise him. It'll soon grow up and everything. And then the father says, you are smarter than boys of your age. We took its mother and it wasn't to blame. Surely. It seems ungrateful to leave it to starve. Son, I can't say no to you. I never thought I would live to see another day. So then the father and the Jody is having discussion. He's trying to convince, and both of them at the end the father says, actually it would be very ungrateful, unthankful on our part that basically the fawn is dying. Because it saved my life. And then Jody says, can I ride back with Millwheel and see if I can find it? So he says, can I just go? And then he says, tell your ma I said you can go. He sidled back to the table and sat down. His mother was pouring coffee for everyone. He said, Ma, Pa says I can go bring back the fawn. She held the coffee pot in the midair and said, what fawn? So the mother is like, what fawn? What are you talking about? Like, what are you asking me? What have you agreed your father to? And then he says, the fawn belonging to the doe we killed. We used the doe's liver to draw out the poison and save Pa. She gasped. She's like, okay, what are you talking? And she says, well, for pity's sake, Pa says it would be ungrateful to leave it to starve. So now, your children are too smart. We all are actually. We know how to play the quiz, right? So he just cut his mother in the middle, interrupted her, and said, Pa said it. It's not me, though he convinced the father. But now to convince the mom, he uses his father. Doc Wilson said, that's right, ma'am. Nothing in the world comes quite free. The boy's right and his daddy's right. Millwheel said, he can ride back with me. I will help him find it. She sat down the pot helplessly. So a lot of people like Doc Wilson and Millwheel, they must be neighbors or people in and around Doc Wilson, maybe the doctor of the father who's living there and thing. They said, that's right, he's actually saying right, so I think you should support him. Well, if you'll give it to your milk, we have got nothing else to feed it. Millwheel said, come on boy, we've got to get riding. Ma Baxter asked anxiously, you will not be gone long. Jody said, I'll be back before dinner for sure. So this is the conversation they are having. Millwheel mounted his horse and pulled Jody up behind him. He said to Millwheel, do you think the fawn's still there? Will you help me find him? We'll find him if he's alive. How do you know it's a he? And then, the Millwheel with whom he's actually riding back to find the fawn, they both are interacting and trying to see where they can actually find him. And then he asks, how do you know it's a he also? So he says, the spots were all in a line. On a doe fawn, Pa says the spots are every which way. And he's trying to explain how he's a he and all the scientific things. So before we move to the story again, the key terms drift back to is go back to, Dilated is enlarged. A close shave is narrow escape. Kept your head, stayed calm in a difficult situation. Hemmed in, caught in a situation where you can't say no. Acorns, small brown nuts. Sidled back, walked back quietly. Every which way, in different directions. Now let's discuss what we've read till now. What had happened to Jody's father? So he's basically got some liver infection and was sick. How did the dough save Penny's life? By giving the liver and removing the poison out. Why does Jody want to bring the fawn home? Because he's guilty that the fawn must be starving without the mother. How does Jody know that the fawn is a male? He's giving that all the spots are in a line and all the scientific reasons. Coming back to the story. Jody gave himself over to thoughts of the fawn. They passed the abandoned clearing. He said, "Cut to the North Millville. It was up here that Pa got bitten by the snake and killed the doe, and I saw the fawn." So he's trying to remember the situations so that they can find the fawn. Suddenly, Jody was unwilling to have Millville with him. If the fawn was dead or could not be found, he could not have his disappointment seen. And if the fawn was there, the meeting would be so lovely and so secret that he could not endure to share it. So now Jody was like, shall I take Millville? Because if he's dead, I would be so lonely. I would be so disappointed. And I don't want anybody to see, you don't want anybody to see you crying or seeing you sad or see your real emotions. You're too scared. What will they judge you? He said, it's not far now, but the scrub is very thick for a horse. I can make it on foot. So he tries to make reasons. And then Millville says, but I'm afraid to leave you, boy. Suppose you get lost or bitten by the snake too. And then he says, I will take care. It might take me long to find the fawn if he's wandered. Leave me off right here. All right, but you take it easy now. You know north, here and east. There and there. That tall pine makes it appearing. So long, Millville. I'm obliged. He waited for the sound of the hoofs to end. Then cut to the right. The scrub was still. Only his own crackling of twigs sounded across the silence. He wondered for an instant if he had mistaken his direction. So this is what they're describing as his, he's moving forward alone on his way. That the sound is soft, there's calm, there's silence, only you can hear your noise. And he was like actually scared now that whether he's into the right direction or not. Then a buzzard rose in front of him and flapped into the rose. He came into the clearing under the oaks. Buzzards sat in a circle around the carcass of the doe. They turned their heads on their long, scrawny necks and hissed at him. Suddenly he saw the fawn, but he even saw there was some bird. Okay, so buzzard was a bird. That they came and they actually sat in a circle around the carcass of a doe, and they were turning their heads on their long, scrawny necks and were hissing at him. He threw his bow at them and they flew into an nest. So then he just went, became a superhero and he threw and everything. The sand showed large cat prints, but the cats killed fresh and they had left the doe to the carrion birds. He parted the grass at the place where he had seen the fawn. It did not seem possible that it was only yesterday. The fawn was not there. He circled the clearing. There was no sound, no sign. The buzzard clacked their wings, impatient to return to their business. He returned to the spot where the fawn had emerged and dropped on all fours, studying the sand for the small hoof prints. So he's not still able to believe that the fawn is not there, so he's trying all his methods. The night's rain had washed away all tracks except those of cat and buzzards. The key terms here: makes a bearing, helps to identify directions. Buzzard is a large bird-like vulture that eats the flesh of dead animals. Adjacent is nearby. Parted is moved or pushed aside. Now let's discuss. So Jody didn't want Millville for the two reasons. What are they? One, that he didn't want him to see his disappointment. Second, he didn't want him to see his over-happiness. Why was Millville afraid to leave? Because he was afraid it was a lonely jungle. What if the snake bit him too? He's a small boy. Continuing the story. Movement directly in front of him startled him so that he tumbled backward. The fawn lifted its face to his. It turned his head with a wide wandering motion and shook him through with a stare of its liquid eyes. It was quivering. It made no effort to rise or run. Jody could not trust himself to move. So now this is basically the scene that the author is trying to portray of the jungle, where he actually now sees the fawn. And you know how beautiful it is. Every emotion has been, every action has been described. That's the beauty of any story. You start imagining what has happened. He whispered, "It's me." Okay, so now he goes to the fawn's eyes and whispers, it's me, Jody." That's a child's innocence, right? The fawn lifted its nose, scenting him. He reached out one hand and laid it on the soft neck. The touch made him delirious. He moved forward on all fours until it was close beside it. He put his arms around its body. A light convulsion passed over it, but it did not stir. He stroked its side as gently as though the fawn were a china deer and he might break it. Its skin was very soft. It was sleek and clean and had a sweet scent of grass. He rose slowly and lifted the fawn from the ground. Its leg hung slippily. They were surprisingly long, and he had to hoist the fawn as high as possible under his arm. So this is what the author is describing as when they met, how he hugged him around the neck gently, how he felt when he touched him, how he's describing the fawn. He was afraid that it might kick and bleat its sight and smell of its mother. He skirted the clearing and pushed his way into the thicket. It was difficult to fly through this verdant. The fawn's legs caught in the bushes and he could not lift his own with freedom. Here the guilt factor is shown, that how he's trying to escape or hide that his mother had been killed by them, and how the fawn is also feeling that the mother isn't there. He tried to shield its face from prickling vines. Its head bobbed with his stride. His heart thumped with the marvel of its acceptance. He reached the trail and walked as fast as he could until he came to the intersection with the road home. So here he's tried to actually pick him up after he was not able to move, shield, protect his face. The heart was thumping, he was scared, he didn't know what to do, but he just ran as fast as he could so that he could reach the road. He stopped to rest and set the fawn down on its dangling legs. It wavered on them. It looked at him and bleated. He said, enchanted, "I will carry you after I get my breath." So because he was a small kid, he got tired and he sat, and then, he wavered on this fawn. He remembered his father saying that a fawn would follow if it had first been carried. He started away slowly. The fawn stared after him. He came back to it, stroked it, walked away again. It took a few wobbling steps towards him and cried piteously. It was willing to follow him. It belonged to him. So now the child, remember how his father said that if the fawn wants you to take him, it will follow you. And the fawn actually followed him. They both belonged to each other. They had some bond with each other. It was his own. It was light-headed with his joy. He wanted to fondle it, to run and romp with it, to call it to it come to him. He dared not alarm it. He picked it up, carried it in front of his two arms. It seemed to him that he walked without effort. So this shows the emotion that Jody was having, that he was with joy. He just wanted to catch it, hold it, run with it, did not want to disturb him, hold him as soft as he can. His arms began to ache because he was carrying him for so long, and he was forced to stop again. When he walked on, the fawn followed again. He allowed it to walk a little distance and then picked up again. The distance home was nothing. He could have walked all day and into the night, carrying it and watching it to follow. Because, when you're into the feeling and movement, you don't realize how tired you are, right? So that was what was happening. He was wet with sweat, but a light breeze blew through the June morning, cooling him. So this shows the weather that was there. The sky was as clear as spring water in a blue china cup. He came to the clearing. It was fresh and green after the night's rain. He fumbled with the latch and was finally obliged to set down the fawn to manage it. So here they talk about the weather. The author is trying to tell about the weather. Then he had an idea. He would walk into the house, into Penny's bedroom, with the fawn walking. But at the steps, the fawn bulked and refused to climb. He picked it up and went to his father. Penny lay with closed eyes. Jody called, "Pa, look." Penny turned his head. Jody stood beside him. The fawn clutched hard against him. It seemed to Penny that the boy's eyes were as bright as the fawn's. He said, "I'm glad you found him." So the first thing that he did was he took the fawn to the pa's room to show that he's actually found him, got him. Jody then went to the kitchen. The fawn wobbled after him. A pan of morning's milk stood in the kitchen safe. The cream had risen. He skimmed the cream into a jug, poured milk into a small gourd. He held it out to the fawn. It buttled its series suddenly, smelling the milk. He saved it precariously from spilling all over the floor. It could make nothing of the milk in the gourd. He dipped his fingers in the milk and thrust them into the fawn's soft, wet mouth. It sucked greedily. When he withdrew them, it bleated frantically and butted him. He dipped his fingers again, and as the fawn sucked, he lowered them slowly. So this is how he went to the kitchen, bought him milk, and then slowly on his hand put the milk, took away the cream, and gave it. So this is, with all this, the author is trying to actually establish the bond that the Jody and Fawn had actually have, from taking care of him, giving him the milk, pouring the milk. The fawn blew and sucked and snorted. It stamped its small hoofs impatiently. As long as he held his fingers below the level of the milk, the fawn was content. It closed its eyes dreamily. So now the fawn was not empty. He wasn't starving, so he had a good time. It was ecstasy to feel its tongue. So the moment he actually sucked from his hand, it was beautiful. Its small tail flicked back and forth. The last of the milk vanished in a swirl of foam and gurgling. Now the key terms. Quivering is shaking slightly. Delirious is extremely excited. Convulsion is shiver. China deer is clay deer that is broken easily. Sleek is smooth and shiny. Hoist is pull up higher. Light-headed is unable to think clearly. Bulked, unwilling to do something. Romp, play. Alarm, frighten. Now let's discuss, how did Jody bring the fawn back home? In his arms. Like rocking and running and coming from all the distance. Jody was filled with emotion. Can you find at least 3? So this is what you have to find. How he was actually happy, contented, his eyes glittering, he holding in his arms. How did the deer drink milk from the gourd? By just slurping it and doing this. So let's discuss the question answers. Why did Penny Baxter allow Jody to find the fawn and raise it? Because even he was guilty, right? Even he wanted to help somebody who has actually saved his life. What did Doc Wilson said? Nothing in the world ever comes quite free. That means that even if the animal gave you lungs to remove the poison, to remove poison, but nothing in the world is free. You have to pay something to get something. Whether it's emotions or humanity. How did Jody look after the fawn after he accepted the responsibility? He took the milk, slurped out the cream, gave him, made him sleep, holded him in his arms, took him everywhere. How does Jody's mother react when she hears that he's going to bring the fawn home? She's shocked. She's like, how will you raise him? You're a small kid. You don't have enough stuff right now. She reacts because they are not financially well. She isn't sure if they want to raise an animal right now, right? Now let's do a quick revision. Jody's father, Penny, wakes up after recovering from a snake bite. Jody is relieved, but he's also worried about a fawn that is left alone in the forest. He discusses with his father that since the doe saved Penny's life, it's not fair for them to leave her child with no one to take care of it. With some effort, Jody finds the doe in the forest, carries it home, carries it some of the way, and then waits for the doe to follow along the rest of the way. Once he reaches home, Jody takes the fawn up the stairs to show his father. He then feeds the fawn some milk from his hands and the deer begins to trust the boy. So this is the story. Here we have covered the major themes, right? Loneliness, guilt, compassion, how Jody actually, helps his father first. But then he is even concerned, he's guilty that, the fawn is alone now. So he gets him, raises him up, takes the responsibility. This is the compassion that the animal and the child is having. So this is all for today. We'll do the poem next.